Welcome to Bernadette's Post, and today I'll be showing how I created this smoke skull watercolor painting. First, I taped down a piece of watercolor paper. For the watercolor brushes, I used an 8 cm wide brush, a No. 2 Winsor Newton mop brush. I didn't end up using these angled brushes at all, but I did have 3 mutter brushes. 2 of them leaked pretty badly, so I only used 1. And I also had the Red Sable mini watercolor brushes. I also used Daniel Smith masking fluid. I used a rubber cement eraser, as well as a regular eraser and a pencil. For paint, I used black and white colored paint tubes, as well as Crayola and Sakura paint pans. I also used Daniel Smith Luminescent Iridescent Moonstone watercolor paint. I pre-sketched a skull design to use as a guideline. I sketched the skull onto a cold press watercolor paper. I used masking fluid to create areas of the paper that will remain white. Just use an old paintbrush and paint areas that will stay white. I painted highlights on the skull as well as the teeth, but my biggest mistake was highlighting areas of the smoke because that created really harsh lines that I had to go back and blend out. That took quite a few layers, so I probably wouldn't do that again next time, but once the paint is all on there, or the masking fluid's on there, just let it dry. I used the 8 cm wide brush to wet the entire page and then dropped purple and black paint all around the skull with the mop brush. I then added white paint using a mutter brush inside of the skull as well as gray, showing areas of highlight and shadow. I used a round mini brush to add black into the hollow eyes, blending the edges with a clean wet brush. I continued building up pigment by adding more layers of the black-purple paint around the skull. I used less water for a concentrated paint and a very thin mini brush to fill in the hollow nose cavity black. I continued building up the layers with purple and black paint and blending the skull in with the background. To blend 2 different colors, you just need to make sure that the brush is wet and the colors are wet. I added more gray to the skull in areas to show shadow. Once the painting is completely dry, I used a rubber cement eraser to lift up the dry masking fluid, which turned out great for the areas of the skull, but I thought it was a little disastrous for the smoke since I had to go back over it. So now to blend out those harsh lines. I added lots of white and gray paint along the edges and then blended out with a clean wet brush. I added streaks of turquoise Crayola paint throughout the smoke as well. Then I blended out the turquoise with water or white paint. continued building up the skull features, blending the connecting colors to create a cloudy effect. I used a black and white Crayola watercolor pencil to define the nose bone. I let the paint dry fully in between layers, then I continued building up the pigment while I continued to blend out the smoke. Water as well. I added iridescent moonstone to areas of the smoke and then blended out with a clean wet brush. To show depth within the smoke, I added darker gray in overlapped areas and then blended out with a clean wet brush. Then I added areas of white to show highlight, darker further away and lighter at its center. added some gray shadow above the skull eyebrow bones, as well as throughout the cheekbones. I picked up the remaining masking fluid that was over the teeth with a rubber cement eraser. Then I used a very thin mini brush with concentrated paint to outline the gum areas in the teeth in dark gray, and then I blended out with a clean wet brush. Adding white into the center areas of the teeth to create depth, and gray in between the teeth. I extended the nostril cavity down a little with a thin mini brush and black paint. Then I continued building up the teeth and facial details. I added more moonstone in areas of the smoke. I used a number 2 mop brush to wet areas of the smoke and then dropped in moonstone paint. I added some final gray shadow above the skull eyebrow bones and then let dry completely. Then I removed the masking tape. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe for more watercolor painting videos.